Hey gang, before we have you diving into the legacy and work and writings and teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we wanted to provide a little background context and setting to Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a day that was celebrated yesterday, Monday, October 18th, and that's celebrated the third Monday of January every year, but it's only been celebrated in kind of more recent times, and so we want to take a step back before we dive into King's life to look at perhaps just kind of some of the background and context of the day itself and how it came to be. Dr. King was quoted as saying, "Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle." And in this particular case, Dr. King was talking about change in the advocacy for human rights and equality and civil rights for Black Americans. But the quote could also be applied to just the recognition of MLK Day and the recognition of that day as a federal holiday. You see, after Dr. King was assassinated by a racist in 1968, there was an almost immediate push for a holiday to honor Dr. King, to honor his legacy, and it failed repeatedly. Black activists began to push, and in 1969, a bill was introduced in Congress to create a federal holiday. It wasn't even brought up for a vote in Congress initially, right? So this bill was brought forward, and it wasn't even brought up for a vote. So if there's not going to be a vote, there's not going to be discussion, there's not going to be any debate. And then finally, in 1983, some 15 years following the assassination of Dr. King, a bill was passed with an overwhelming veto-proof majority through both houses of Congress, and then later signed into law by President Ronald Reagan. It was then observed for the first time in 1986. However, despite the bill's passage in 1983 and despite it first being celebrated in 1986, it wasn't until the year 2000 that all 50 U.S. states celebrated Dr. King and his legacy on MLK Day, which begs the question, if Dr. King was such an important, admired and respected advocate for civil rights and for equality, why did it take so long? And I think a part of that is because we, you and I in the present day, we maybe have somewhat of a unclear or perhaps different image or perception on the past, and it's important to remember that while Dr. King was preaching his message of equality and love and justice and freedom, he was someone who was also a bit of a lightning rod. While he had support from a wide range of Americans, he did not have total support. He did not have full support, right? There were numerous Americans that were opposed to his message. There were numerous Americans that were opposed to his methods. And in fact, a public opinion poll in 1965, so this is 3 years prior to his assassination, in 1965, 85% of white respondents to this public opinion poll said that the actions being taken by Dr. King and his supporters were hurting the cause of Black Americans in their push for equality. And so while today, you know, some 50-odd years later, 60 years later, we look back on Dr. King with great admiration and respect, it's important to know that in the time that Dr. King lived, in the time that Dr. King marched and fought and was joined by countless others in the civil rights movement, his methods, his ways were not universally supported or agreed upon the way they are today. So with that in mind, and with that context in mind, we're going to take a closer look at Dr. King, a little bit on his legacy, and then we're going to be taking a closer look at one of his many pieces of writing, known as a letter from the Birmingham jail. Dr. King was arrested and imprisoned numerous times for his actions and his fight for equality. And we're going to focus on one of his most influential pieces of writing. We're just going to key in on a few select passages as you work your way through these slides. And we hope that you make some connections between Dr. King and his message and your life. And we hope that, you know, you learn a thing or two. And we hope that we get you thinking and thinking big about the world the way it is, and perhaps the world it can be one day.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.